You just have fun a lot?
When I play with all my friends.
You have a lot of fun.
I'm playing.
James, what are your favorite toys to play?
Flyers.
What's your favorite thing about church?
Flyers. Walk.
Because it's a little bit hard to understand why kids are important. It's just that people love kids and they can understand what God is.
Because they listen. Because they help people and save people.
Because we need to spend time with our parents and have fun and like shop and stuff. And we need to learn about God so we know not to do wrong and to do good and not lie and pay attention in class so we can learn.
Because if kids be alone, that means some adults have to take care of them.
Good morning. How you guys doing? It's good to see you guys. Hey, if you're new and you don't know me, my name is Brandon. I have the privilege of being the lead pastor here with One Church, and it's good to see you guys. Hey, it's officially Christmas season. You guys excited? Anybody? Right, by show of hands. Anyone already exhausted from the season? Keep those hands up. Yep. So if you say Merry Christmas, because my very correct theology and how Christmas works is it starts the day after, Thanksgiving. We've been talking about this for a couple weeks. You've been hanging out with us as One Church, but it's good to see you guys. Hope you guys had a great Thanksgiving, and I am excited for these kids to be hanging out with us today. My oldest one, who's supposed to be in service, ran off already, so shows you my kid is super under control right now. But no, it's good to see you guys. Kids, it's fun to hang out with you guys doing the sermon bingo. So you'll be looking for certain things that take place in the service that may help you fill out your bingo chart, like this one right here. This may help you. Right there. So there you go. Check it off your box. But we'll have some fun with that today as well. But it's good to see you guys. Thanks so much for taking time to hang out with us as One Church. Today we are wrapping up our series that we've been calling Seat at the Table that we've been going throughout this past month. And what we're digging through in this series is we're looking at how relationships are vital, how God created us and wired us to be in relationships with each other. It's important for our lives, but it's also very messy and stressful. Relationships are not always easy. They can be difficult. And especially during this holiday season where we spend a lot more time with family, with friends, we travel more and things like that to be with those people that we have in our lives, it can get very stressful. So we've been looking at how do we not just survive this season of relationships, but we actually thrive in them. And we've been looking at how in Jesus' day, he ate meals with people to give them value, to give them a place in his life, and how we can do the same in our own lives. When we give them place in our lives, we give other people value, we give them purpose, and we show them that they are humans and they are loved by God. So we're looking at different things like that. Who do we give a seat at our table? Who do we give a place in our lives? And to recap what we've been talking through, week one, we talked about the head of the table, ourselves, and how as the head of the table of our lives, we should follow the lead of Jesus and not look to be served, but to serve other people. And then in week two, we talked about family dynamics and how that can be messy. We don't get to choose our families. Our families are kind of just there when we're born. And so how do we, engage in those relationships and love them even when there can be difficulty? And then last week, we talked about how Jesus didn't just keep his table for him and his family. He opened it up for everybody. There was space for everybody. And how we as a church and as individuals, as followers of Jesus, we need to open up more space in our lives for other people. People like our neighbors, our coworkers, outcasts, people who feel like they don't have an invite to the table. We need to open up our lives to them as well. And today, to wrap up our series, we are talking about the kids' table, which is why we're kind of having this family dynamic today. Because I don't know about you guys, but the holiday tradition for me growing up is, you get together with family, the table's full of people, where there was always that little small table off to the side, and that's where the kids sat. Now, normally that happened because the adult table was filled with all the adults. There wasn't space for all the kids. But there was almost just this dynamic of, hey, kids, you have your own special little table over here. You're going to hang out here. And it was always awkward when you started hitting that middle school age, because you're too old for like the 4-year-old and 5-year-old you're eating with, but you just maybe aren't old enough to go sit with the adults, so you're sitting awkwardly with the little kids the whole time. It's like, this is the worst holiday ever. But this idea of a kids' table, this is probably something a lot of us grew up with. In fact, this past Thursday, I was at my in-laws' house, and we had a ton of people filling up the table, and right behind us was the kids' table where my kids sat. And it was a lot of fun, and seeing them sit there and seeing how they sat there for about, like 45 seconds before they ran around the house again. But the kids' table is a tradition. But the idea that we're wrestling with today is children are a huge piece at this seat at the table conversation, because children play a huge role in all of our lives, whether we admit it or not. I think of how kids just change things in lives. If I could go back, one thing I would appreciate a lot more is the freedom that Danielle and I had before kids came into our lives. Like, I even think about the day before Noah, our oldest son, was born. Danielle hated that day. She remembers it because she was ready just to burst. She was sick of being pregnant, but we just hung around and did nothing all day. It was a Saturday. We were just hanging out. We were laying on the couch. We ate what we want. We did what we want. We slept in. Whatever it may be we wanted to do, we could do that because we didn't have to worry about the kid dynamic. And then the next day, Noah was born, and the freedom that we had that we didn't appreciate was now gone. And if you're a parent, you know exactly what I'm talking about, because freedom is not a thing anymore. We are, chained down to whatever our kids need in life. But I would learn to appreciate that, because here's the deal. Here's the truth. Kids are needy. They can be difficult. They consume a lot of time, a lot of energy, a lot of resources. And I look at my family. We have 3 kids, 6 and under. We're just getting started. We're going to have to take out a loan to feed them throughout high school with how much food they're probably going to eat. But kids that's just part of the dynamic of having children. And kids play that vital role in our lives, but it comes with a lot of stress, a lot of energy, a lot of anxiety sometimes, but this is just what children bring. On the other side, they also bring a lot of joy, a lot of happiness. They help us to, I think, understand and follow God so much better, because they give us a glimpse of who God is as Father. They also just bring a lot of laughter. It's funny, my middle son, Drew, he is just a kid that can make you laugh, and he doesn't even mean to most of the time, and we'll just laugh at something he says or something sarcastic. Like at dinner this past week, we were having dinner, and Drew declares to everyone, to Danielle and me and his brother, she's like, if you finish all your food, you get dessert. And Danielle's like, whoever said you get dessert tonight? And Drew goes, I do. I just said, if you finish all your food, you get dessert tonight. And we just start laughing at him. He's like, don't laugh at me. It's like, Drew, you're funny, man. He's like, I'm not funny. And it's just this funny dynamic. This is what kids bring. This is what my kids bring to my life. If you have kids, you know that. If you have nieces and nephews or friends that have little kids, you see some of that dynamic that kids can bring on the positive side too. But there are many times in life, I'm not going to lie, when my kids get me to the point where I just have to almost either scream out loud or it's in my head. I'm like, what do I do with these kids right now? Because they're crazy, they're tired, they're cranky, whatever it may be. Because I look at my role as a parent, and I realize my job is to raise these kids in a certain way with a certain purpose, and for a certain outcome. And I hope that outcome takes place. One of the scariest things I've learned as a parent is the outcome that I hope for my kids that's going to happen. It's not guaranteed, and that's terrifying as a parent. But the truth is, though, children still impact all of us. And maybe you have kids. Maybe you're sitting here right now and you were just with me right away because you have kids. You know this tension. You know this dynamic. You are right with me in this. And maybe you're someone right here who you don't have kids. And you're like, I kind of know what you're talking about, but maybe not because I have some nieces or nephews, whatever. But you still kind of understand the impact that children have. Or maybe you're someone here, you don't have children. Maybe you're someone who just don't like kids. Like, kids are just like this icky, disgusting thing. Like, they get around, you kind of clam up. You're like, I don't know what to do with you. You're kind of weird. You smell. Did you poop? Like, I don't know what's going on with you right now. Someone take you, because I don't want to deal with you right now. Maybe you're that, and that's okay. If that's you, you're not a kid person, it's okay. I'm glad you're here as we're talking about this. Or maybe you're someone, you have kids and you don't like kids. And I'm just going to say that's a whole different problem. Like, we'll have to talk on the side after service or something like that, but maybe that's you. But no matter who you are, This kids topic is important for all of us to explore together because whether you realize it or not, everyone in this room, we are all going to impact the growth, the development, and the outcome of children in our lives. How scary is that? Every single person here, we will all impact the growth, the development, and outcome of kids in our lives. Because of that, we need to look at what God says and what Jesus did when it comes to children. Because we all have to ask the question, what do we do with these kids? Especially in this context of One Church and the kids that we have here. You see, in the Bible, God's design in the Bible are very clear in the value and the love that God has for children. In Genesis 1:28, God says this. It says, Genesis 1:28, God blessed them and said to them, be fruitful and increase in number. Fill the earth and subdue it. Rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky and over every living creature that moves on the ground. Basic translation, God says, go and make them babies. This is part of his dynamic for our families sometimes. It's when you're married, have kids, this is part of God's design. He values children. He loves them. We actually see in Psalms, and the Psalms which is a collection of writings and poems and songs written by different people that worship God, that show value, that talk about the value that God has. And Psalm 127, 3-5 says this, children are a heritage from the Lord, offspring a reward from him. Like arrows in the hands of a warrior are children born in one's youth. Blessed is the man whose quiver is full of them. They will not be put to shame when they contend with their opponents in court. The Bible says that there's a blessing with kids. We don't always feel that as parents, but he's saying blessed when your quiver is full of arrows representing children. You have a bunch of kids. My sister-in-law, she's from a family that has she's a ton of siblings. And I look at her dad, and he filled his quiver, man. He's got a ton of kids in his quiver, and good for him. And I'm sure I know he looks at that as a blessing. This is how God views children. God values children. Children are a huge piece of God's design, and they are loved and they are valued. And Jewish culture also saw it this way, but the unique thing about the Jewish culture in biblical times is kids were also meant to be quiet and kind of in the background. A lot of the way the Jewish kind of culture worked when it came to kids in biblical times is kids were valued, they were loved, they were a blessing, but they were also kind of expected to stay quiet, kind of off to the side, kind of at their kids' table until they grew up, and it was their time to take their place as a man and woman in that culture. And so this is how they operated. Children were meant to be kind of more, not seen and don't cause a ruckus. But then we have this scene take place in Jesus' life and in the book of Matthew. And we see, it's actually in a couple of different Gospels. We're reading through the book of Matthew with this story today. But in Matthew 19, 13-15, we see this story take place with Jesus and some children. And it says, then people brought little children to Jesus for him to place his hands on them and pray for them. But the disciples rebuked him. Jesus said, let the little children come to me and do not hinder them, for the kingdom of heaven belongs to such as these. When he had placed his hands on them, he went on from there. And so in this dynamic of this story, what's taking place is Jesus' ministry is really popular at this point. And people are coming from all over just to get their piece of Jesus. They're looking for healing. They're looking for teaching. They're looking for purpose. They're looking for meaning. And Jesus is their answer for that. He's the source of that. And so lots of people are coming to Jesus at this point. What also is happening is some of the attention that Jesus is getting is coming from some mothers who are trying to bring their children to Jesus. Because it was very common in that day, especially in Jewish culture, for moms to bring their children to a person of importance, like a holy man that can pray a blessing over them. Maybe it was a religious leader, maybe this dynamic teacher like Jesus was. They want to just have this blessing upon their children because they viewed these people as someone from God. And so these mothers who value their children so much are trying to get their kids to Jesus so he can just place their hand on them, pray a blessing over them, and just have a piece of his life. And the disciples see this. And they start shooing the moms and the kids away, kind of pushing them away, almost essentially saying, there are more important people for Jesus to deal with right now than you and your children. And the disciples probably thought they were doing something good. Their intentions were probably good in this situation. They were kind of running interference for Jesus. They don't want demanding mothers and rambunctious children getting in the way of the real ministry that Jesus was there for. The ministry to heal people and to teach people. These kids were just kind of seen as a nuisance in that culture. And so these disciples were shooing these parents away, and Jesus sees this, and he says to them, he rebukes them and says, listen, do not hinder these kids. Do not stop them from coming to me. Let them come to me, because God's kingdom, the kingdom I am bringing to this earth, it belongs to kids like these. Jesus gets mad here. Actually, in the other Gospels, it says he gets angry. And the other 2 times, the word that's used for anger in that situation is actually other times when Jesus was just destroying and ripping apart the Pharisees, the religious leaders. So Jesus is mad in this dynamic. He sees people pushing away these kids, and he gets upset. He gets furious. And so he says, don't keep them from me. Let them come to me. Jesus embraces the children. Don't cause them to stumble. Don't get in their way to get to me. Because God's kingdom belongs to them. And it's interesting. What does Jesus mean when he says, listen, my kingdom, God's kingdom belongs to such as these? And I think what he's saying here is he's saying they are the model for what a citizen of God's kingdom should look like. So in this dynamic, these children who are meant to, supposed to stay on the side, stay in the background, stay quiet, these children are humble because they know their place. They know they're not supposed to cause a ruckus. They know they're supposed to honor and respect their parents and their elders. And so they're not the ones that are going to be here to cause a ruckus with Jesus. It was the mothers bringing their kids to Jesus. So children are humble in this dynamic. Jesus also sees them and sees that they're not seeking out rank or position. Kids know in that dynamic, in that culture, that they were not trying to better themselves in front of other people. They knew their place. They were humble. They weren't seeking out better status. They also were kids who also knew their need. Kids were people that they knew they don't survive in that context without their parents. Like you ever have a kid, like our kid, your kid ever like say to you, like, I don't need you, I don't need your help, I can do this on my own? Like I'm pretty sure my 2-year-old would live life on his own if he could right now. But he, hopefully he realizes he can't live life without me and Danielle at this point. This is how kids operate. They know their need for help. They know their need from their father and their mother. And Jesus sees that. He knows that. And he points out it's that attitude, it's that dynamic, it's that personality that they're living out. This is the life that God wants from his followers. And Jesus essentially says, you need to become like them. This is the model we should look at. Children. Because they're humble. They don't seek rank or position. They don't look for better status, and they realize their need for help. And so Jesus sees this in the children. He welcomes them. He embraces them. And Matthew writes that he had placed his hands on them, probably said a blessing over them, prayed for them, and then he went on from there. But he gave children a place in his life in this moment. He placed value on them. He gave them purpose. And Jesus gave them a place, and here's the truth, so should we. We all should be giving children a place in our lives. Now, some of us in this room don't really have a choice. There's already kids who are part of our lives. We're parents, we're aunts, we're uncles. Those kids are going to be a part of our lives no matter what. We can't escape that. So really, we don't have a choice in that. And so for this one, it should be pretty easy for you to say yes to because you can't really say no to it. But as individuals and as a church, we have the responsibility to invest and lead into kids and teenagers to help them know and follow Jesus, no matter what our dynamic is with children in our home or not. We are called not to hinder children, but to lead them to Jesus. You see, what the apostles got in trouble for in this moment of Jesus' life was they were stopping the kids from getting to Jesus. Jesus says, don't hinder them from me. They were preventing the kids from getting to Jesus. They thought there was more important people or more important things for Jesus to do than deal with these children. The same truth is for us. We can't hinder children from coming to Jesus. Now, our dynamic's a little different then. Our dynamic with children in our culture now is not so much stay on the sidelines and stay quiet till it's your turn. We've kind of flipped that around. We essentially almost worship children in our culture. We have turned children into something we put all of our focus on, all of our energy on, and we center our entire lives around our kids. We've heard the term helicopter parents. They're the ones that kind of hover around their kids. There's a new term for parenting. It's called lawnmower parents. Essentially, we push our kids wherever we want them to go. We get so focused on children that we center our entire lives around them, and that's not healthy. That's not good either. So we live in a different dynamic when it comes to parenting and dealing with children in our context than Jesus' day. But we still have this awesome ability to hinder kids from Jesus still. And this is how we do that a couple different ways. We love our kids, but we can hinder our kids from not meeting Jesus and getting to Jesus by simply not living out our own faith. We talk about faith, we're involved with the church, but at home, faith is not something we carry into that. And our kids see that. Our kids see our hypocrisy. Our kids see, yeah, we should go to church, but then nothing else happens with that. faith becomes something we don't live out ourselves. Faith has to become something that we earnestly seek to belong to a church, to explore our faith, and serve other people in Jesus' name. Now, that does not mean, especially if you're a parent here, please hear this. It does not mean that you have to have it all figured out when it comes to faith and following Jesus. None of us do. We've got questions, we've got doubts, we've got struggles. Our kids need to see that too. But they should see our faith as something that's very real and something we are exploring together with them. Our kids should see and hear us talk about and explain that we are sinners saved by grace, and because of that, we are living out this faith in Jesus Christ. But by not living on our faith, we can hinder our kids from knowing who Jesus is. Something else we do in our culture a lot as parents or just people with kids is we have a tendency to say that other things are more important than faith in our church community. We have this tendency to say, pursuing living out faith becomes something out of convenience rather than necessity. We kind of say, either verbally or in our actions, church is a good thing as long as we have time for it, but not just going to church, but being the church. And what I mean by that is, hey, Sunday mornings is good. And I would encourage every one of us here to make this a priority. But if Sunday mornings do not overflow into our homes and into our conversations, into our dinner table, into how we interact with our neighbors and our coworkers and our family and friends, if it doesn't overflow to that, this Sunday morning thing's a waste. And our kids need to see that. Our kids need to experience that with us. Sunday mornings are important, and we need to put a necessity on it, but we need to also put a necessity on this is how we live our lives because of Jesus Christ. And it's not something we do out of convenience, but we do something out of necessity because of our faith in Jesus. But we have a tendency to teach our kids that church is something we check off the list of duties that we're supposed to do rather than teach them it's a community for us to live our lives out of. And this is something we can do to hinder our kids as well. And something else we do with our kids to hinder them from knowing and following Jesus is we teach them to worship ourselves rather than worship God. And this can be a touchy subject, especially in this culture of lawnmower parenting. Because if you ever talk to a mom or dad and say, hey, you put too much effort into your kid, or you put too much resources or whatever it may be, they're going to look at you like you're crazy and pretty much judge you harshly for it. But it's true. What we have done in our culture of parenting and working with kids is we've taught our kids that it's about our happiness, our goals, and our dreams. But oftentimes when we do that, God has no place in our happiness, our goals, and our dreams. What we hope for is that God helps bless us and achieve our goals and our dreams. But if he doesn't, then it's kind of like, okay, God, forget that. I'm going to keep going after my own thing. And we are teaching our kids to go after the things that they deem important, whether God has a place in that or not. That's a dangerous thing when it comes to our faith. Because God just doesn't serve a piece of our lives. He's supposed to lead our lives. And when we allow that to take place, when we say Jesus is Lord, he's boss, then what happens is all the values that he values, all the goals that he has, goals in his kingdom, all the things he wants us to live out and do, those become the things that are more important to us. And sometimes our dreams and our goals may have to take a back seat to what God's are. What we do is we say it's more about us than God. And we need to pay attention to that to make sure we're not doing that because that can hinder children. In doing so, we show them that it's our values and goals over God's and that hinders them. Following Jesus means we die to ourselves daily in order to follow Jesus more. This is what we have to pay attention to. This is how we can hinder our kids from coming to know and follow Jesus. And so if that's hindering them, we need to do what Jesus says to do and let them come to him. We need to lead kids to Jesus. If hindering keeps them from Jesus, then our goal is to get them to Jesus. And here's just to be clear, we can never make kids believe in Jesus. Like I love my son Noah and Drew and Kobe, but I cannot make them believe, trust, and follow Jesus. I wish I could, but I can't. But what I can do and what we all can do is we can introduce children to Jesus and we can cultivate that relationship with Jesus. And every single person in this room, whether you have kids or not, we all have a role in that. We have kids in our lives and we have to give them a seat at our table, not just keep them in the corners until they're old enough, but to give them a place now. And we lead them to Jesus in a couple different ways. One is at home. And this is for you who are parents, you have kids. Here's something to be reminding all of us of. Is this starts at home. It doesn't start at church on a Sunday morning, it starts at home. And parents, just so you know, you are and you always will be the number one influence in your kids' lives. Always will be. Research shows it, faith shows it, everything, all the numbers show it. The most influential people in a kid's life as they're growing up is the parents. You are the number one influence, so model that faith. Show them, teach them, talk about God, talk about faith. Pray as a family. Make this a priority in your home. Church isn't just something you do on Sundays, it's something you live out together as a family. So make that a priority in your homes. There's this thing in the Old Testament that's called the Shema. And what it is, it's this moment of scripture in Deuteronomy. I'm going to read that here in a second, but this is kind of like a sort of pledge of allegiance for the Jewish people. And what would happen is if someone started saying this, they all could essentially stand at attention and just continue on with it because it was kind of like that pledge of allegiance for the Jewish people. And here's what it says, Deuteronomy 6, 4 through 9. It says, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength. These commandments that I give you today are to be on your hearts. Impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home, when you walk along the road, when you lie down and when you get up. Tie them as symbols on your hands and bind them on your foreheads. Write them on door frames of your houses and on your gates." So essentially, what God is saying here is this. Everything I'm teaching you, everything I'm leading you in, this is who I am. This is how much I love you. Teach them to the children. Impress this onto them. Talk about it when you're walking down the road, when you're lying them down to bed. Every moment of your life is an opportunity to teach and show children who God is. And we have a responsibility to do that as parents, but also just fellow believers in Jesus Christ. We have to own it. And it starts at home. So do that. So it starts at home, and also we need to lead kids to Jesus as the church as well. And this is especially for all of you here. Maybe you don't have kids, or maybe that's just not your dynamic. Maybe you're one of the people like, kids are icky. That's okay. You still have a role in this. You see, parents are the number one influence in a kid's life, but it takes a village. It takes a church to help raise, lead, and disciple a kid to grow, know, and follow Jesus. Our mission as a church is to work as one to help people follow Jesus, and kids are a part of that. When we say we're working as one to help people follow Jesus, we're saying that about children too, and all of us play a role in that. All of us are part of that mission. Because here's why. Most people who come to know and trust Jesus and choose to be a follower of Jesus do so before the age of 18. Over 80% of people, over 80% of Christians across this world chose to follow Jesus before their 18th birthday. A big reason why? Because the kingdom of God belongs to them, because they're humble. They're not looking for that status. They eventually do because we teach them that. And they realize their need a lot easier. I don't know about you guys, as I've gotten older, I've learned that I've become a lot more selfish, a lot more prideful, and it's a lot harder for me to change my mind on things. And if you're an adult here, you can just go ahead and say, yep, me too. Because we all do that. It's very difficult, and by the grace of God, I think we can change, we can be humbled, and we can continue to repent and follow Jesus, but there's something about that time when they're growing up in adolescence and as children. Their hearts are primed to just trust Jesus. Sure, they don't have it all figured out, but they make those decisions to do that. And so we as a church need to help them get there. We as a church need to help kids know and follow Jesus. It's one of the biggest reasons we started One Church in this community. Because there's lots of kids in this community. There's lots of kids who don't know Jesus. And we as a church need to help them know Jesus. There is a book that's called Sticky Faith. And what this is done is a big research project by Kara Powell and Brad Griffin, and they're just amazing people who just studied all these kids when they went to college and things like that. What kept them in their faith and what made them leave their faith? Because one of the most common things kids do is when they graduate and leave high school, they leave the faith that their parents raised them in. It's extremely common. What they looked at is what are the things that kept kids knowing and following Jesus as adults? And one of the biggest things was actually ratios. You see, I did youth ministry for a long time, and one of the things I always thought about was ratios. Do we have enough adults to keep this thing under control, essentially? And so we started thinking, okay, if we have one adult for every 5 to 7 children, they can't necessarily burn down the building, but we can keep them contained, they'll be safe enough. That's a lot of time what we thought about. So we started thinking this idea of dynamics of ratios. If we have one kid for every one adult for every 5 kids, then okay, we'll be okay. But what this research shows, the most important thing when it comes to ratio with kids is you actually have to flip-flop that number. You need 5 adults for every 1 kid. There needs to be 5 adults for every 1 kid who is pouring into them, leading them, praying for them, investing them, discipling them. And that's going to give us the best shot of helping our kids know and follow Jesus. That's going to help kids be led to Jesus, for them to know him, to trust him, and follow him. What does it look like to have 5 kids or 5 adults for each kid? Now, we can't do that in 1 kid. We don't. If we had 5 adults, per kid in those classrooms, there'd be no one here. Like, I'd be talking to nobody, which some of you may like that. But I'm talking about this overflows outside of church. So the challenge to start to think about is this. Who are the 5 adults to help lead each kid at one church? Who are the 5 adults to lead each kid at any church across our city or across our country and across our world? Who are the adults who are going to invest in the kids? This is where we all have a role to play in this. Or who are the kids who have no connection to a church that you know? Who are their adults? The answer is probably you. You're one of them. Or parents in the room. Start thinking about this now. Who are the 5 adults that are going to be pouring into your kids outside of you when it comes to their faith in life? Who are they? And how are they going to play that role? Because here's the truth. As a dad of 3 kids, I can't do it myself. I can't do it with just me and Danielle. I need you guys to help me. And we need to help you too with your kids. So we do this as a church. And we need to do this in different ways. We need to do it by simply, some of you need to be stepping up and serving with 1 kids every once in a while. Maybe you're good with kids. And maybe what you need to do is once or twice a month say, you know what, I'm in. I'm going to go serve. I'm going to hang out with the kids. I'm going to play games with them. I'm going to teach them. I'm going to love on them. I'm going to build relationship with them. That's how you can be one of those 5 adults. Or maybe it's simply as you're greeting on a Sunday morning. As people are coming in, you shake hands, you say hi to people, but make sure if you're a greeter, you're acknowledging those children as they walk in. And I know a bunch of our team does that already. I love you guys for that. But we need to make sure that Sunday mornings, kids feel like they belong here too. That's how we can be those adults in their lives. We can have them feel like they're serving with us in our small groups and be a part of what we're doing. And here's the deal. If you're someone who doesn't like kids, here's a challenge I'm going to give you. You need to pray to God to change your heart on that. Because I don't think we have a choice in our lives whether we like kids or not. Sure, they're difficult. Sure, they smell sometimes. But God gave them value. Jesus gave them a place in his table. And they should have a place on our table too. So maybe that's what you need to be praying about. This isn't an option for us as a church. It's a necessity. It's an absolute must. Because here's the thing. The greater church will never fail until Jesus comes back. But churches, the individual churches, they close their doors all the time. And one of the biggest reasons they close their doors and they cease to exist is because they stop investing in the kids and teenagers in their church and their community. We will never do that as one church. But for us to do that, we have to do it together. So we lead the kids to church or to Jesus at home, as a church, and finally as a mission to live out. The best way kids have a seat at the table is by inviting them to live on mission with us as a church. So we're going to be talking about with them what they learned at church today and what we learned at church today, what we talked about. Every Sunday at One Kids, there is a parent cue sheet that you can take, and it gives you steps to ask questions and do things throughout the week that's going to continue to build this faith into your kids throughout the week. We need to be doing things like that. We need to be praying for our neighbors, investing in our friends, and loving the people around us. We need to help them see that life is not about serving themselves, but by loving others like God loves them. And this is the best time to do it, especially this holiday season. So I'm going to challenge you guys, invite kids to live missionally with you guys. If you have kids, do that with them at home. If you don't, look for ways to do it with the kids that you do have in your life. Go serve together. Talk about faith together. Invite your kids to live missionally. Next week, we're kicking off a brand new series called Advent Conspiracy. And what we're doing over the next month is we have this mentality sometimes as Christians in the church, like we need to take back Christmas for us. Let's put Christ back in Christmas. And I love the sentiment there, but I think we missed the point. If we want Christmas to change for us, it starts with us as individuals. And so for the next 4 weeks, we're going to talk about this Advent conspiracy of how Christmas can change for us and how we can worship more, how we can give more purposefully, and how we can love all the people in our lives because that's what Jesus came and did for us. And so we're going to be doing that over this next series together. And with it, starting next Sunday, we'll have an Advent calendar that you can go through with your kids. So I'm going to challenge you guys next Sunday, make sure you pick one of those up, go through it each day with your kids. It's going to be great. It's going to be awesome. It's things that you can do as well. But be here for this series and have it be something you can talk about with your children each day after we gather as a church. Come for this series, hear how we're going to do this. Also hear throughout this series how we're going to invest more into this next generation of kids in our community and teenagers in our community because we have some really cool stuff that we're going to unveil over this next series. But come be a part of that and bring a friend with you. I'm excited for Advent Conspiracy starts next Sunday. And also, something we can do as well, we need to love the kids that maybe don't have a place at this church or any church or any home. There's an organization that we have started working with and partnering with called the Foster Love Project. The local store here is in Dormont, but what it is, it's a nonprofit that works with child welfare agencies. And they collect donations of clothes, cribs, car seats, things of that nature. So when a foster parent welcomes a child into their home, they can go to these stores and they can shop for free to make sure they have everything they need for these kids. Because there is something that is so Christ-like to invite a child without a family into your home. And they can go and shop for free. And each year they have this placement bag drive. And what it is, they collect these backpacks that are full of things for kids to have when they get placed in a home. Because oftentimes when a foster child is placed in a home, they get nothing that they can call their own. They're just going to put there and hopefully the family has stuff for them. And I'm sure they do, but it's still a difficult situation where kids don't have stuff they can call their own. And so they're doing this backpack drive, and we have an opportunity as a church today to live this out. Out in the lobby, there's a table full of backpacks. And one church was able to buy a bunch of these backpacks, and on these backpacks there is tags that have a gender and an age on it and a list of things that we should fill that backpack with. And what happens is that when you fill that backpack with these items like toothpaste, toothbrushes, soap, a toy, a book, it's something that kids can call their own when they go into this scary situation of a new home. That's the way we can love kids in our city. And my challenge for us as a church is let's love kids in our city by making sure there's not a single backpack left on that table when we leave here today. Grab a backpack and fill it up with the list of items on that card that's attached to it. And by December 9th, so 2 Sundays from now, bring it back by then and we'll get it to the Foster Love Project. But this is a way for us to love kids and show them a little bit of who Jesus is. Who cares if they don't know it comes from us? Rather, let's love them by helping this organization out that's loving kids like crazy in our community. This is what we can do together. So grab a bag, and if you have kids, take them shopping with you for this. Explain to them what you're doing and why you're doing it. Have them fill up the backpack, and have them bring it back within the next 2 Sundays so they can be a part of this. You see, this thing starts at home. But we need to live it out as a church, and our kids need to have a role in loving our community with the mission that Jesus has given us. This is what we do. Why? Because this is our one thing for the day. When we give kids a place in our lives look more like Jesus. Jesus placed value on children. He gave them a place in their lives. And every single one of us needs to do the same thing. This is what it looks like to be the church that God's calling us to be. This is something we do. It impacts both now and it impacts eternities. The impact one church should go on for generations because of our passion and our love for kids. In fact, one church wouldn't exist if it wasn't for this taking place. I've told you guys before, if you're new, I grew up in a broken home in my teenage years. My dad was dealt with addiction, with cocaine, heroin, alcoholism, and it was a pretty messy situation. And I don't know where my life would have been if it wasn't for other adults that came into my life and my family's life and said, hey, we're going to help you. My mom did everything she could as a single mom with 3 boys. She did an amazing job. But to this day, I could still name the names of Bill Hauk, Dave Ballback, Brent Houghton, Bob Huber. Names that mean nothing to you, but mean everything to me. Because they were the adults that walked alongside me and said, hey, here's who Jesus is. Here's what it looks like to be a follower of him. Here's what it looks like to be a part of a church. It's because of their investment that I can honestly say that I stuck with my faith. I've got 3 boys. And if you've been around them, you know they're crazy. My hope and prayer is as they grow up and they start figuring out life and asking questions and wondering about God and faith and Jesus and what that stuff looks like, that I am not the only voice in their life speaking into them about that. That you guys are too. That you're walking alongside them even for moments on Sunday mornings to love them, to show them grace, to correct them when they do something wrong, which is often. But I need you guys with me to help my kids. And we need to be in this thing together, helping each other's kids. And we need to be loving the kids of our community. Because that's what it looks like to give them a seat at our table. This is the life we should live as Christians, and this is the life we should live as a church. Let's pray. God, thanks so much for today. We thank you for this holiday weekend and the fun we get to have with that. But God, we thank you for this church. We thank you for the kids who are part of this church. God, I pray that you use every person in this room right now, and the people that are in the classrooms still with the younger kids, God, that you use us to lead them to you. We don't hinder them from you, we lead them to you. When we do that at home, God, we do that as a church, and we do that at the mission you've given us to live out. God, help us to know that every kid is loved and is valued, God, and we need to have that same heart that you have for them. God, help us to make a difference that, God, the impact of one church, the impact of our lives goes on for generations because of how much we care for, we love, and we lead children to you. God, let that be us as a church. In your name we pray.